Welcome back to the deep dive. We're going deep into evolutionary constraints and adaptations today.
Oh, this is going to be interesting.
You bet. And we've got some great sources to work with.
Yeah, lots to unpack.
For sure. We've got stuff on genetic principles, mutation, and how organisms adapt.
We even got some stuff on the challenges of island life.
You mean like for actual islands?
Yeah, like imagine an island
Right.
with a ton of food and no predators. A small population of deer there could explode in number.
Oh, interesting. So it's not all just about unlimited growth.
Exactly. This handbook, Branches, Bell Curves, and Beyond, talks about how even good things,
Like what?
well, like abundant resources, they can actually become a problem.
If there are too many of them.
Yeah, if the ecosystem is pushed past its carrying capacity,
Carrying capacity.
like a natural limit,
a cap.
yeah, on how much life and environment can actually support.
So is that what would happen with the deer? At first.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
You'd see that classic exponential growth curve.
Like a jet?
Shooting way up, but then as the population grows, resources start to get more scarce, Things like disease and competition would increase.
That makes sense.
That's what the book calls environmental resistance.
Okay.
It's the pushback against that unchecked growth.
So then what happens?
Eventually, the population hits a ceiling,
Okay.
that carrying capacity we're talking about.
Gotcha. So the growth just stops?
The curve levels off,
Oh.
forming that S shape.
Uh-huh.
And that means the population reaches a point where the environment can actually sustain it.
So it's like a balance.
Yeah, it's a dynamic equilibrium.
Okay.
It fluctuates, as things like resource availability changes.
But what happens if the carrying capacity is exceeded? I mean, does the whole thing just crash?
Well, not always, but there can definitely be consequences.
What do you mean?
Well, the handbook uses this great example of algal blooms in lakes.
Like that green slime?
Yeah. They can be triggered by excessive nutrients.
Oh, right. Like phosphorus.
Exactly. Phosphorus runoff. It's like you're suddenly giving the algae this massive buffet.
You're going to eat it up.
Yeah, and they multiply like crazy, totally exceeding the lake's carrying capacity for them.
So what happens?
A once clear lake suddenly becomes choked with algae, blocks out the sunlight, and it disrupts the whole ecosystem.
Wow. Yeah, that's not good.
No, not at all.
So exceeding that carrying capacity really does have a big effect.
Oh yeah, the handbook emphasizes that everything in nature is interconnected.
Makes sense.
So when one part of the system changes, it impacts that whole web of life.
Yeah, I get it. So where does genetics fit into all of this?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting, you see. Genetics provides the blueprint
For what?
for how organisms develop and function,
Okay.
and ultimately how they adapt to these constraints.
So we're talking DNA.
Exactly. It influences how organisms respond to all these external pressures.
Like the environment.
Exactly.
Oh, wow. So the handbook actually dives into the basics of genetics.
It does.
That's cool.
Starts with Mendel's laws of heredity.
Oh, yeah, I remember those.
How traits are passed down from parents to offspring.
Vaguely.
Yeah.
Something about dominant and recessive genes
That's it.
and Punnett squares.
Exactly. Mendel's work was groundbreaking. He figured out how genes get shuffled and recombined,
Okay.
and that creates the variation that's so crucial for adaptation.
Wow. Okay. I see where this is going. But how does this relate to carrying capacity?
Well, think of it like this.
All right.
Mendel's laws laid the groundwork for understanding how genetic variation arises.
Right.
And without variation, populations wouldn't be able to adapt to changing environments.
To those constraints we were talking about.
Exactly.
Okay, I see. So even though Mendel wasn't studying deer or algal blooms or anything,
Yeah,
his work is actually fundamental to these bigger ecological concepts.
it absolutely is. It's all part of this intricate web of natural processes.
I like that, an intricate web.
From the tiny level of genes to the massive level of ecosystems, it's all interconnected.
Wow, okay. So the handbook also mentions something called Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium.
Oh, yeah.
I remember struggling with that one in school.
Oh, it's a tough one.
Can you remind me what that's all about?
Sure. Hardy-Weinberg is a theoretical model.
Okay.
It describes how gene frequencies would behave
Okay.
in a population that's not evolving.
Hold on. Not evolving. I thought everything was always evolving.
Oh, in the real world, yeah.
Yeah.
But Hardy-Weinberg gives us this baseline, like a point of comparison.
Okay.
It assumes no mutations, no natural selection, no gene flow between populations.
So it's like a what-if scenario.
Exactly. What if things stayed the same?
Right.
It's highly idealized, but it helps us measure how real populations deviate from this theoretical equilibrium.
Oh, okay.
And it shows how those evolutionary pressures are always shaping life.
So how do real populations deviate?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
What are those evolutionary pressures that push them out of this equilibrium?
Well, one of the most significant factors is mutation. Mutation, isn't that usually like a bad thing?
Not necessarily. Mutations are simply changes in the DNA sequence.
Okay.
And they're actually the ultimate source of all that genetic variation we were just talking about.
Interesting.
Think about it. You, me, every living organism.
Yeah.
We're all products of countless mutations that have happened throughout evolutionary history.
So we're all mutants.
In a way,
Yeah.
I kind of like that.
It is cool, but it's important to remember that mutations are totally random.
Okay.
They just happen spontaneously.
Right.
And actually, most of them are neutral.
What do you mean?
They have no noticeable effect.
Okay.
But some mutations are beneficial or harmful, right?
Right.
That's where natural selection comes in.
Ah, yes, natural selection.
Natural selection acts like a filter.
Oh, okay.
It favors the mutations that increase an organism's chances of survival and reproduction
Makes sense.
in its specific environment.
Okay.
It's how populations adapt to those environmental limits we were discussing earlier. So a beneficial mutation would be like,
Like one that helps a deer digest tough plants better.
yeah, on our island, right?
Exactly. It might be able to outcompete other deer for food.
And survive.
Yeah, that deer might survive on less food, reproduce more, and pass that beneficial mutation on to its offspring.
Pass it on.
Over time, that mutation could become more common in the population,
Right.
making the whole population better adapted to its environment.
So mutations are like these little experiments that nature is running all the time.
That's a great way to put it.
And natural selection decides what works.
Yeah, the ones that work best, the ones that are successful, are
Right.
the ones that best fit the current environmental conditions.
Interesting.
And that brings us to adaptation, you know,
Adaptation, right?
the process by which populations become better suited to their surroundings over time.
So how does all these mutations actually lead to organisms adapting to their environment?
Well, that's the big question.
I mean, we see creatures living in the hottest deserts and the freezing Arctic and even the deep ocean.
Those are great examples.
Amazing.
Adaptation is really the product of natural selection acting on all that available genetic variation.
Okay.
So let's take the scorching desert, for example.
Okay.
Harsh sunlight, limited water, extreme temperatures.
Yeah, not my idea of a good time.
Definitely not a vacation destination.
No.
But some organisms actually thrive there,
Like what?
like cacti.
Cacti, yeah.
They've evolved incredible adaptations to survive in that arid environment.
They have to.
They've developed thick stems to store water,
Right?
spines to reduce water loss, and shallow root systems to quickly absorb infrequent rainfall.
Wow, that's smart.
All those adaptations are the result of generations of natural selection,
Working its magic.
favoring those mutations that enhance survival in the desert.
So cacti went from regular plants to these desert survivors.
Over millions of years, yeah.
It's amazing how evolution can work.
It really is.
So tell me about those deep sea creatures.
Oh, yeah, the ones that live in complete darkness.
Under all that pressure.
Yeah. They always look so bizarre.
They do. It's like something out of a movie.
They must have some incredible adaptations to survive down there.
Oh, I bet they do.
Things like bioluminescence to attract prey or mates,
Oh, right.
flexible bodies to withstand the pressure,
Mm.
even unique metabolic pathways
Oh, wow.
to cope with the lack of sunlight.
That is so cool.
It really highlights the power of evolution to shape life.
In even the most extreme environments.
Yeah, exactly. It makes you realize that normal is relative.
What do you mean?
Well, what's normal for a cactus is deadly for a rainforest tree.
Yeah,
What's normal for a deep-sea fish would be impossible for us.
that's true.
Adaptation is always about context, about fitting into a specific ecological niche.
I see.
There's no one-size-fits-all solution in nature.
No, of course not.
And it all ties back to those constraints we were talking about earlier.
Oh, yeah, right.
Organisms are constantly pushing against those limits, trying to find ways to survive within those boundaries.
It's a balancing act.
It is. Adaptation is about finding solutions to those constraints. It's about making the most of available resources, coping with environmental challenges,
Yeah.
and ultimately passing those successful strategies on to future generations.
So that brings us to trade-offs, right?
Exactly. We've been talking about all these amazing adaptations, but there's always a cost, right?
I guess.
An organism can't be perfect at everything.
No.
It's like you can't have it all.
Right.
That leads us to the principle of allocation.
Okay.
Organisms have a limited energy budget.
Okay.
They have to spend that energy wisely.
Right.
It's like having a cosmic credit card with a finite limit.
I like that.
Every trait, every adaptation requires an investment of energy.
Okay.
And investing heavily in one area often comes at the expense of another.
So like a skill tree in a video game.
Yes, that's a fantastic analogy. It captures the essence of how organisms allocate their resources.
Nice.
A cheetah, for example, invests heavily in speed and agility.
Right, for hunting.
But that comes at the expense of stamina.
So it can't run forever.
Exactly. A cheetah can't maintain a high-speed chase for very long.
It's a trade-off.
It is.
The cheetah's a sprinter, not a marathon runner.
Exactly.
Are there any other examples?
Oh, tons. Think about a giraffe.
With its long neck.
Yeah, it's a marvel of adaptation, allowing it to reach those high leaves.
Uh-huh.
But that same neck makes it vulnerable to predators when it needs to drink water.
Oh, right, yeah.
So even a seemingly advantageous trait can have its drawbacks.
So it's about finding the right balance for the environment.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that balance can shift as environments change.
Right.
That's why adaptation is such a dynamic process.
Fascinating. So what are some of the most striking examples of these trade-offs in action?
Well, have you ever seen a peacock with its tail feathers fully displayed?
Oh, yeah, they're beautiful.
Absolutely stunning, but those elaborate feathers come at a cost.
What do you mean?
They make the peacock much more vulnerable to predators.
Because they're harder to fly with.
Exactly, and they make them much more visible.
So they're basically a giant come eat me sign for predators.
In a way, yes, but those feathers are also crucial for attracting mates.
Right, the classic trade-off.
Exactly.
Survival versus reproduction.
It's a delicate balance.
It is.
Another great example is the male fiddler crab.
What's special about them?
They have one giant claw.
Really? Why?
It's used for display, for attracting females, and for fighting off rivals.
So it's a multi-purpose tool?
It is, but that giant claw also makes it difficult for them to do everyday things.
Like what?
Like feeding or burrowing.
So it's a compromise.
Exactly. They've sacrificed some functionality for the benefits of that impressive claw.
It's fascinating how nature works that way.
It really is. Those are some pretty dramatic examples.
They are.
Those incredibly long tail feathers.
Yeah.
They must make flying a bit more challenging.
I would think so. It's like nature saying, okay, you can have these flashy feathers to attract a mate, but
you got to work harder to fly.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not always about being the biggest, strongest, or fastest.
Nope.
It's about finding that sweet spot.
Finding that balance.
Yeah, that optimal balance between different traits that works best in a particular environment.
Exactly.
What about those extremophiles?
Extremophiles?
Yeah, the ones that live in those crazy environments.
Oh, yeah.
Like boiling hot springs.
Right.
Or the freezing depths of the ocean.
Yeah, those are some tough places to live.
What sort of trade-offs have they made?
Oh, they've made some serious ones. For example, those organisms living in boiling hot springs, they have proteins and enzymes that are incredibly stable at extreme temperatures.
That makes sense.
But that stability comes at a cost.
Oh, how so?
Those proteins might not be as efficient.
Okay.
Or as flexible as proteins in organisms that live in more moderate environments.
So they've specialized.
Yeah, in heat resistance.
But they might not be as good at other things.
Exactly. It's like they've put all their skill points into one specific branch of the skill tree.
I like that analogy.
It works, right?
Yeah, it does.
This brings us back to that idea of interconnectedness.
Interconnectedness. Okay.
How all these adaptations and trade-offs are happening within a larger ecosystem.
Right, because we can't isolate organisms from their environment.
Exactly. Their adaptations are shaped by the interactions they have.
With other species.
Yeah, with other species, with the available resources, and with the physical conditions of their habitat.
It's a big web.
It is. It's like a giant web of interconnected adaptations.
And each species is influencing the evolution of others.
Exactly.
That makes me think about symbiotic relationships.
No.
Like the cleaner fish that remove parasites from larger fish.
Yeah, they've both evolved to benefit from that interaction.
So the cleaner fish gets a meal.
Yeah.
And the larger fish gets rid of those harmful parasites.
It's a win-win.
A win-win. I like that.
It highlights the fact that nature isn't always about cutthroat competition.
Right.
Cooperation is also a powerful force that shapes the diversity and resilience of life.
Cooperation, I like that.
It's important.
Yeah. Speaking of resilience, what about those ecosystems that seem to defy the odds?
What do you mean?
Like those lush oases.
Oh, yeah, oases.
That pop up in the middle of the desert.
They're amazing.
How do they thrive in such harsh conditions?
Well, They're like these little microcosms of life that demonstrate how organisms can create their own favorable environments.
Even the most challenging conditions.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like they've found a loophole in those constraints.
In a way, yeah. They've carved out this niche where life can flourish.
Despite the limitations of the surrounding desert.
Right.
It's a reminder that nature is full of surprises.
It really is.
Full of unexpected solutions.
Yeah.
And remarkable resilience.
And that resilience is often linked to the diversity of life within an ecosystem.
Diversity.
Yeah. The more diverse an ecosystem is, the more stable and adaptable it is.
Oh, okay, I see.
Think of it like a diversified investment portfolio.
Oh, okay.
You're less vulnerable to fluctuations if you have a range of investments.
That's a great analogy.
It highlights how important it is to conserve biodiversity.
Biodiversity.
Protecting the variety of life on Earth isn't just about preserving individual species.
Right.
It's about safeguarding the resilience of entire ecosystems.
Wow, that's a powerful thought.
It is.
It all comes back to that interconnectedness.
Yeah.
From genes to ecosystems, it's all part of this grand tapestry of life.
Beautifully said.
Shaped by evolution.
Yeah.
And expressed in the intricate patterns of nature.
And we're a part of that tapestry, too.
We are.
We're not separate from nature. You know, we're embedded within it, our lives intertwined with all the other organisms that share this planet.
That's a good way to put it.
And that realization comes with a sense of responsibility.
Responsibility.
A moral imperative to understand and protect this intricate web of life that sustains us.
Protect it, yeah. This has been an incredible journey.
It has.
We've covered so much ground today.
A lot to think about.
But I feel like the conversation doesn't end here.
No, it doesn't.
There's always more to explore.
Always more to learn.
More to learn about the wonders of nature.
So what's the final thought we want to leave our listeners with?
What's the parting wisdom?
I think the most important message is this marvel at the complexity of nature.
Okay.
Appreciate its delicate balance and embrace your role as a steward of this extraordinary planet.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the wonders of the natural world.
Well, those are some pretty dramatic examples. Those incredibly long tail feathers must make flying a bit more challenging.
Oh, yeah. I bet it's like nature saying, okay, you can have these flashy feathers to attract a mate.
Right.
But you're going to have to work a bit harder to fly.
Exactly. It's that constant tension in evolution.
Yeah.
The balance between showing off your best qualities and just surviving long enough to pass them on.
Pass them on.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not always about being the biggest or strongest or fastest.
No.
It's about finding that sweet spot, that optimal balance between different traits.
Yeah.
That works best for that environment.
Exactly.
What about those extremophiles?
Extremophiles?
Yeah, the ones that live in those impossible environments like boiling hot springs or the freezing depths of the ocean.
Those guys are fascinating.
They really push the boundaries of what we thought life could endure.
They do.
What sorts of trade-offs have they made to survive in those places?
Oh, they've made some serious trade-offs.
Like what?
Well, for example, those organisms living in those boiling hot springs, they have proteins and enzymes that are incredibly stable at extreme temperatures.
That makes sense.
But that stability comes at a cost.
Oh, what do you mean?
Well, those proteins might not be as efficient or flexible as proteins in organisms that live in more moderate environments.
Are they specialized?
Yeah, in heat resistance.
But they might not be as good at other things.
Exactly. It's like they put all their skill points into one specific branch of that skill tree.
I love that analogy.
It works.
It really does.
So this brings us back to that idea of interconnectedness.
Interconnectedness.
How all these adaptations and trade-offs are happening within a larger ecosystem.
Right. We can't isolate organisms from their environment.
We can't.
Their adaptations are shaped by the interactions they have with other species.
Absolutely.
With available resources, with the physical conditions of their habitat.
Yeah, it's like this giant web of interconnected adaptations.
It is.
Each species influencing the evolution of others.
Yeah, that makes me think about those symbiotic relationships we see in nature.
Oh, yeah.
Like the cleaner fish that remove parasites from larger fish?
Oh, yeah. The cleaner fish.
You both benefit.
Yeah, they've both evolved to benefit from that interaction.
The cleaner fish gets a meal.
Gets a meal.
And the larger fish gets rid of those harmful parasites.
It's a win-win situation.
A win-win. I like that.
It really highlights that nature isn't always about that cutthroat competition.
Right.
Cooperation is also a powerful force in shaping the diversity and resilience of life.
Cooperation. That's a good point.
It is.
Speaking of resilience, what about those ecosystems that seem to defy the odds?
Like what?
Like those lush oases that pop up in the middle of a desert.
Oh, yeah. Oases are fascinating.
They are. How do they manage to thrive in such harsh conditions?
Well, they're like these little microcosms of life.
Oh.
They demonstrate how organisms can create their own favorable environments.
Even in the most challenging conditions.
Even in the most challenging conditions.
It's like they found a loophole in those constraints we were talking about.
Yeah, in a way they've carved out this niche where life can flourish.
Despite the limitations of the surrounding desert.
Exactly.
It's a reminder that nature is full of surprises.
Full of surprises.
Full of unexpected solutions.
Unexpected solutions.
And remarkable resilience.
It is remarkable.
And that resilience is often linked to the diversity of life within an ecosystem, right?
The more diverse an ecosystem is,
Yeah.
the more stable and adaptable it is.
Oh, okay.
Think of it like a diversified investment portfolio.
Okay.
You're less vulnerable to fluctuations if you have a range of investments.
That's a great analogy.
It highlights how important it is to conserve biodiversity.
Biodiversity, yeah.
Protecting the variety of life on Earth isn't just about preserving individual species.
No.
It's about safeguarding the resilience of entire ecosystems.
That's a powerful thought.
It is.
It all comes back to that interconnectedness.
Interconnectedness.
From genes to ecosystems, it's all part of this grand tapestry of life.
Beautifully said.
Shaped by evolution and expressed in those intricate patterns of nature.
And we're a part of that tapestry, too.
We are.
We're not separate from nature.
Right.
We're embedded within it. Our lives are intertwined with countless other organisms that share this planet.
That's a good way to put it.
And that realization comes with a sense of responsibility.
Responsibility.
Yeah, a moral imperative to understand and protect this intricate web of life that sustains us.
Protect it. Yeah, this has been an incredible journey.
It has been.
We've covered so much ground today.
Lots to think about.
But I feel like the conversation doesn't end here.
No, it doesn't.
There's always more to explore, more to learn about the wonders of nature.
Always more to learn.
So what's the final thought?
The final thought.
The parting wisdom we want to leave our listeners with.
I think the most important message is this.
Okay.
Marvel at the complexity of nature.
Marvel at it.
Appreciate its delicate balance.
Appreciate it.
And embrace your role as a steward of this extraordinary planet.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the wonders of the natural world.